Hey everyone, my name's Christy. Welcome to my corner. Thank you all so much for joining me today on this Tuesday where we're going to talk about needles, embroidery needles in particular, and we're going to compare 4 different popular brands of embroidery needles. But before we get to that, welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. And for those of you who keep coming back for more, it is so great to have you as part of my artistic and crafty adventures. And it's been great to get to know you in the comments here on YouTube and also on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can find me at Dr._Christy, and I'll put that right here and in the description box down below. And that is where I post progress pictures of my pieces, also baking that I don't record, that's like not historical baking, just kind of baking pictures that I do, pictures of my dog who's adorable, pictures of life, just kind of, that's kind of my social space. So if you want to hang out with me over there, you can find me at Dr._Christy and follow me there. This is a channel about embroidery and other textile arts and crafts and baking and history and the history of those things. So if any of that seems interesting to you and you would like to come along for the adventure, please subscribe. I'd love to have you as a part of my community. Today I want to talk about needles, because needles are and having a good needle and the right size needle is one of the most important parts of quality embroidery. And there are all different kinds of needles. If you go into a craft store or an LNS, you will see needles of different sizes and different purposes and different brands. And so what I'm talking about right now is embroidery needles or crewel needles. These needles are different from cross-stitch needles in that they have a sharper point because you're actually piercing through the fabric, and they usually have, from what I can tell, a smaller eye. Now, I don't know much about cross-stitch needles at all. I have a couple for some black work pieces that I'm working on, but I don't really know cross-stitch needles. So I'm going to be talking about embroidery needles, but the companies that I will be discussing make cross-stitch needles, and I'm assuming use the same manufacturing process. And so the same issues and pluses and minuses, basically, of the different brands should carry over into cross-stitch. And I started thinking about this because I was having trouble threading my needle. My floss would often shred and fluff up. And I assumed it was just me, right? I assumed that I just was not good at threading needles and I just had to deal with this, right? And I had DMC needles, and this is happening all the time. I was watching my mom's Corona vlog maybe from several months ago, and I'll link to her channel down below, Flame and Fiber Podcast. She does podcasts about knitting, and right now she's doing a vlog every day during COVID times, just to keep us all company and talk about what her daily life is. Anyway, she was talking about the issues she was having with DMC needles, and so she bought a different brand of needles and it worked so much better. And so I thought, well, maybe it's not me. Maybe I can actually thread a needle and I just need better needles. So I bought Bohin needles, I bought John James needles, and I bought Tulip needles. And so I want to compare those 4 brands of needles: DMC, Bohin, John James, and Tulip. And these are generally somewhat easily found brands of needles. These aren't like super specialty needles. You can get them at most LNSs, you can get them online, right? They're pretty readily available. And I guess I just want to talk about them and just kind of compare them. Embroidery needles usually come in sizes 1 through 10. The most common being 3 through 9. The lower numbers are larger, the higher numbers are smaller eyes, and you want to make sure that you choose the correct size for the amount of thread that you're using. So I tend to use 1 or 2 strands of 6-strand embroidery floss. And so I use a 7 or a 9 in general. But here you can see sizes 5 through 10. These are John James embroidery needles. 5 is in the middle and 10 is on the outside. And you can buy them in multi-packs like this, or you can buy them in single packs like this. Sorry for the glare, but this is a John James size 7 pack. And the John James embroidery needles are called embroidery needles. The Bohin embroidery needles are called broder, which is embroidery in French, or crewel needles. The Tulip needles come in this really cute little vial. I don't know if, there we go. And are called embroidery needles. I don't remember what DMC calls theirs. I don't have a actual package with me, but I think they're called either Embroidery or Crewel needles, but I'll look it up and I'll put it right here. So those are the 4 brands that I want to compare. I wanted to compare like with like. And so I have mostly size 7s. And so I have a size 7 needle in all 4 of these brands. And then I have 2 size 5 needles, a John James and a DMC. And so I took close-up pictures of the eyes of these needles. The pictures aren't fantastic, I have to say. I thought that my camera could do macro better, but it apparently isn't doing macro very well, and my phone didn't accept the macro lens that I have that I used to use with my old phone. So I don't think that they're great quality pictures, but I think you can see the difference, and I think that's what's key. So first I want to talk about the size 7 needles because I have them in all different brands. Here are pictures of all 4 of those needles. We have DMCs, we have Bohin, we have John James, and we have Tulip. And if you look at the DMC eye, you can see that it's a bit jagged. It's more jagged than the other ones. And that is why I think I was shredding my floss. Here is the Bohin, which is much smoother. And that is the kind of my second favorite of the 4. Here we have John James, which is again a little bit jagged, and I was watching a video about hand sewing needles. I don't remember the name of the person, but I'll put that right here, and I'll put a link to the video down below. And she was saying that John James needles used to be manufactured in the UK, and that's when they were really good. But they are no longer manufactured, they're not always manufactured in the UK. And that is why apparently their quality has gone down a little bit. And I can see that, right? I can see if you look at the Bohin, which is manufactured in France, versus the John James needle, there is a difference, I think, in the jaggedness of that eye. Now, by far, the best needles that I have used are these Tulip needles. And you can tell the Tulip needles because they have a gold tip. I don't remember where Tulip needles are manufactured, but I will look it up and put it at the bottom of the screen. But you can see how smooth that eye is, which means that your threads aren't catching on things. So of these 4 needles, my top one is definitely Tulip. Number 2 is Bohin, which is beautiful to thread. Number 3 is John James, and number 4 is DMC. And I want to say that the DMC needles are good enough, right? I mean, I used them for a long time and they worked. It was just frustrating, right? It was just frustrating to me, but they worked better than a lot of other needles that I had tried. So the needles that you often get in those cheap embroidery kits are much lower quality than the DMC ones. But before we, move on to that, I do want to show you the size 5s. So here is the size 5 DMC next to the size 5 John James. And you can see as a direct comparison, the DMC is still more jagged. So that is something to keep in mind. And I had mentioned that you want to make sure that you choose the size of needle for the number of strands that you're using or the thickness of your thread that you're using. When I use 3 strands of thread, I use a size 5 or 7. When I use 2 strands, I use a 7 or 9. And when I use 1 strand, I use a 9. And we'll talk more about threads at another time, and I'll compare different threads and their kind of shreddability, perhaps, because I definitely have opinions about different embroidery flosses. And when I first started, I thought that it didn't matter. And then I quickly discovered that it does matter. So in my opinion, the best needles are Tulip needles. Number 2 is Bohin. Number 3 is John James. And number 4 is DMC. And I would say that DMC is kind of a mid-average grade, and then it goes up from there. And the prices reflect that. The Tulip needles are more expensive than the DMC needles, which for me is worth it because of the lack of frustration. So I hope this look at needles was helpful for you, maybe thinking about trying a new brand of needle. If you're frustrated about how difficult it is to thread your needles, well, there are 3 elements in threading a needle. There is the needle, there is the thread, and there is you. And I don't want you to assume that if you're having trouble threading the needle, that it's you. It could be that you're using a cheap floss or that your needle is kind of janky. I guess that's what I want to say. If you have any questions or comments or other brands of needles that you really love that you'd love me to try, please put them in the description box below. If you enjoyed learning about this and would like to learn more about the different tools you can use for embroidery, please subscribe. I plan on doing little videos like this. I have opinions about hoops too, by the way, so I can talk about hoops. I have a ton of different kinds of hoops. I like exploring these tools because each individual one isn't that expensive, and so I can like buy all different brands and try them out. I do want to say again though, this is my opinion based on my own work and based on these images, but man, it is a joy to work with a Bohin or a Tulip needle, and I highly recommend, if you haven't done it already, try those guys out. I think that's it from me. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on Friday for my Flosstube. So take good care of yourselves and have a good one. Bye.